like your instructions in French or English?
English, please.
Each team has 20 minutes to present his or her case to the judges. I will show papers for the 10-minute mark, the 5-minute remaining mark, 2-minute remaining mark, and the final 30 seconds of the presentation. The last 10 seconds, I will show my hands counting down. The team that has not finished by the end of the 20 minutes will be stopped in order to start the question period. I would like to take the time to remind the panel of judges that the question period is 5 minutes long exactly, and that it is mandatory to ask at least one question. I will now let the judges introduce themselves, and you may begin when ready.
Luc-André Larocque, I got a finance degree and law degree in URO, and I work for Desjardins.
Jamila Hamidou, j'ai un baccalauréat en finance et une maîtrise en ingénierie financière et je travaille déjà pour Desjardins.
Bonjour, Benoît Marleau, conseiller en gestion de patrimoine pour la Caisse de Jardin Johnson. Bonne chance.
Dear Mr. Gauthier, building a business is a journey of 1,000 steps, but it starts with one step. You've taken this step when you started your business more than 50 years ago. Now, it's time to look forward. As Wayne Gretzky once said, you have to skate to where the puck is going to be. And you're doing this well. You're thinking about next generation takeover. We're here today to help you during the final sprint. So please let me introduce you to the team at True North Advisor, including Chloé, Jean-Sébastien, and myself, Kevin. We're here today to assess the mandate of should you expand your business by increase the size of your factory, by a new ERP system, or should you go with the acquisition of a 47% stake in a smart clothing manufacturer. So when we think about this issue, we have to consider your values and your goals. So we know that your goals are increased sales, decreased costs, and increased profitability. Yet there's other things to consider. Most of all, your daughter, who's going to take over the business. So of course, this project needs to include her in the future. Then we have to think about the financing options. So you're still a small business, growing fast, but we think that not every financing alternatives will be possible for this project. And finally, keeping control. So as we've said, 47% control is not majority. So this is also something we need to consider in those issues. Now, our recommendation is that you pursue the expansion of your business, of Gauthier, and that you let go the opportunity of buying the 47% stake. Now, how did we come to this conclusion? First of all, post-retirement. We'll talk a bit more later, but you want to keep control and you want to make sure that your business, Gauthier, keeps growing. Second of all, control. Then again, if it's a 47% stake, this is only a minority investment. Are you really running the business? Not really. And finally, higher return. So as Chloé will walk you through the financials later, you will see that we see significant upside in the first project of expansion, whereas the second project is a bit more risky and limited in terms of upside. Now, today we're going to talk about the strategic rationale behind this decision, the valuation, so we'll show you different IRRs, and finally Jean-Sébastien will talk to you about the implementation. So once we know what we're going to do, how are we going to do it, and the risk and mitigations. So I'll start by walking you through the analysis. So what we want to see here is really the industry, what makes a good player, the key success in the industry. Then we'll just look at your business quickly, a snapshot of Gauthier, where you are, and if we look at these key successes, where you're situating yourself. Then we'll look at the two alternatives, and then I'll pass it on to my colleague, Chloé, who's going to do the financials. So if we start with the industry. Now, the textile industry is super competitive. You have different risks, currency risk, slow growth, we're talking here about 3%, and most importantly, since you're in Canada, there's a big difference between retail sales and manufacturer sales. So we should not mix the two of them. As you can see here, manufacturing sales are expected to decline at an annual rate of about 3.9% in Canada. Yet, retail sales are going at about 2%. What that means is to stand out, you really need to comply with these key success factors. So those are technology. You want to make sure that you can produce fast, rapidly, and then that it can be efficient. Second is employee training. You need the best. If you have great technologies, you also need the best employees just so that they know how to use it. Then cost efficiencies. It's super competitive. You have China, you have Mexico. All those places are also manufacturing textile. And finally, scale. The bigger you are, the bigger your sourcing capabilities and the higher your margin. If we look now at Gautier, so where is Gautier compared to these factors? So first of all, what is it? So it's a manufacturer of men's apparel. It's been founded by the founder more than 50 years ago, so it's a family business, and now it's time to think about the future. Now, if we think about this, you have the technology, we know it. It's one of your core competency, and you also have the player, the good employees. You're in Montreal. We have many universities here. We know that you can easily source great people. So, of course, you can check the first two boxes. But then, if we think about cost efficiencies, of course, there's room to improvement. There's always. And finally, scale. There's also opportunities to grow, as one of the two projects that you mentioned. Now, let's deep dive into the alternatives. So the first one, you buy a new factory, you build a new factory, buy new machinery, and new ERP system. So you're more efficient, bigger, but that's a risk, right? You need to fulfill all those orders. And the second option is to acquire the 47% in new fashion. So smart retailers, so electronic way to do the knitting and so on. So it's a very rapidly growing niche within the business, but then again, not controlled. So we'll focus here on the alternative that fits your criteria the best. So increasing profitability, increasing sales, decreasing costs, and finally post-retirement benefits and so on for your daughter, because she needs to take it over. Now, first alternative is to enlarge a facility. So here we're talking about a $2.6 million capital expenditure for the factory and the machinery, plus an additional $300,000 for the new ERP system. So this is a significant investment. But why did we decide to go with it? So post-retirement. So we believe that this is a massive project because you still have 8 years to go. So your daughter in those 8 years will be part of this project that is growing the business. So she will feel like you felt when you started the business. So she will have ownership in the project, control, and most importantly, she will know how to run it. Second, growth vectors. So we really believe that a larger facility will allow you to capture more market share in the US, in North America in general, and your sourcing capabilities will go forward. Finally, the financing. We're talking here about machinery and real asset. So those are way easier to finance with lower rates than you would have, for example, for intangible assets or share in or non-controlling interest. Now if we look at the second opportunity, so buy new fashion. So the good things about this is that it's a high growth segment of the industry. So of course you get to be there and you can ride the wave, and of course this is important. But then control is an issue. So first of all, 47%, and second, your daughter. If you buy this company, you can't really take it over because there's still 53% share that isn't yours. So if you have a project in mind, you cannot really go forward with it without the approval of all the other shareholders. So at the end, 8 years from now, what do you have? 47%, your daughter is maybe involved, maybe not in this project. We're not too sure about that. And finally, it's going to be very hard to find the financing to buy a minority share in a company that you have no expertise in and that you don't control. So this being said, we recommend that you go with the first alternative. And if we come back to the key success factors, as you can see now, technology is here because you have the new ERP system, you already have the technology. Employee, well, as we said earlier, you can already source them easily. Cost efficiencies, now that you're bigger, better sourcing, better margin. And finally, scale. You can now enter full force in the United States market, and then you can profit from that. I will now let the floor to Chloe, who's going to walk you through the financials. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So by looking at the first project, we were a bit creative with our valuation. So we started by looking at the entire cost that it would take to enlarge the facility, buy the specialty equipment that we would need, and buy the MRP. So we were looking at costs after taxes of $3.3 million. And so we would need to secure financing to be able to properly invest to secure the funding, because as we know, you are low in cash currently. And the thing that we wanted to know is that, okay, you had the opportunity to maybe go with equity versus debt for this opportunity, but we know that the cost of equity is higher than the cost of debt. But the issue with debt is to know, can your position actually sustain this debt, and can you afford to take on this debt? So we will show you our forecasts in the next slide, but on this slide we see that the interest coverage ratio based on our forecast enables you to actually take on this debt. We have a plan structure for the debt, which Jean-Sébastien will carry you through towards our implementation. But the first thing that we want to stress is that by taking on debt, which we've implemented in our forecasts, we can afford it. Okay. So we looked at the EBITDA to fixed asset ratio. So to say that you would supplement your fixed assets with the enlargement of the facility and investments in equipment, what is your ability to generate EBITDA? The ratio on average was 0.4 times. So we estimated that there would be, because of the operational efficiencies and so on, you could get a multiple appreciation, a multiple expansion of 1.5 times that would be realized 5 years from now. We see you to realize this full potential gradually, so year by year. So you see 25% realization in year 1, 50 in year, well actually 0 in year 1 because you're implementing everything, but then after year 2 you get 25%, 50%, 75%, and so on until full realization. So this is the incremental EBITDA. So you can see we have the baseline EBITDA based off of the company and regular growth prospects. Then you've got the incremental EBITDA line, and then you've got the resulting total EBITDA for this company. Then we factored in the added debt. So if we go on to the next slide, we see the resulting cash flows, in which we've accounted for the added interest payments that would be incremental. So not the ones that we already had, but the ones that would be linked to the project. This yields an IRR of 14.1%, which, as you will see, I will now go on to describe the second project, which is actually higher than the second project. So now, looking at New Fashion. New Fashion is a company that we have limited information on, first and foremost, and you do not have that much expertise into smart clothing. So looking at it seems to be like a relatively high growth business. However, when looking at the top line for the next 8 years, we forecasted a growth rate positive, certainly, but increasing at a decreasing rate. At a decreasing rate. Then we looked at the gross profit margin. We expected the company could achieve a certain level of scalability and benefit from a reduction of cost of goods sold as a percentage of its sales. So we see that margin going from 19%, the gross profit margin to going from 19% to 20.4% at the end of our forecast horizon. Then looking at operating expenses, we see a similar pattern of operating leverage achieved. So we see the margin compression going from 2016 at 8% to 7.5% in 2023. We didn't really know what was in operating expenses, so to remain prudent, we maintained them at 0.5% of sales. We've used a tax rate of 20%. So this is what our income statement looks like for the company. We see, based off the forecasts, our forecasting assumptions, we see an EBITDA margin expansion going from 10.5% in 2016 to 12.4%. So then what we did is that we bundled all of our forecasting assumptions, and then we employed the discounted cash flow method to look at the value of the company and what would the initial equity investment require to invest in the company. So our assumptions for the DCF, we have a CapEx intensity of 1.5% of sales and changes in net working capital as a percentage of sales around 6%, which is consistent with the 2 past years for the company. Using a WACC of 10%, a growth rate in perpetuity of 2%, which is in line, as Kevin stressed early on, about the growth trends in the industry. And using the 47% ownership, we get to an initial equity investment of 1.6 times, 1.6 million. Then we looked at what it would be like to exit the business 8 years from now using a similar multiple. We've discounted the multiple down to 3.8 times because of the achieved growth. Because the company is eventually, after 8 years from now, it will have incurred a lot of growth, which will have inflated EBITDA a lot. So that's why that's how we're justifying the lower multiple used. And so we assume that the company on its books could be at around 3.6 million 8 years from now. So by looking at the NPV for this period, we see that we generated an NPV of 12.7%, which is below the 14.1% that was generated with project number 1. And again, we'd like to stress that it would be difficult to realize synergies because, again, you have a minority interest in the company. So I will now carry it over to Jean-Sébastien, who will carry through our implementation.
So now the final step in this presentation is what are we going to do with this recommendation, right? So we've looked at both the analysis so far, which is great. You have a great company that can potentially be much greater with the potential expansion project, and then the valuation makes sense also. You have a 14% IRR expected on this project. Now, what do you do when you get out of this room? What are the next steps involved in this? We're going to start by looking at a timeline of what are these steps over the next year. And then we're going to go through a bit of risk and mitigations involved in this project. To start right with the timeline. So this is over the span of 1 year. It has been factored in the model, so this 1 year ramp up in production and expected slowdown in production actually from the expansion has been factored in the model and in the IR that we've provided. So first, secure financing. So these we can see they are segmented by months. So the first month, during the first month, you want your construction permits as well as the securing your financing options that we will talk a bit later. Then architects contracting RFPs for the machinery, so you want requests for proposals for the machinery that you need for expansion project, as well as an RFP for the construction itself. Then we have the construction that spans over about 7 months, so for the expansion of your current plant. Then machinery setup, so once the plant has been almost finalized, you get in the machinery, we forecast about 2 months of this for really the machine to be installed, ready to run. And during the second half of this, we want to, this whole period, we want to train employees. We want to make sure that once everything is set up, that the employees can get in, start manufacturing, start the production, and really from that point on, ramp up the production. So then factory startup on the 12th month, and marketing plan from Mireille, we cannot see it here. Mireille, your daughter, her involvement in this business is expected to increase in the future, and having a marketing background with her bachelor's at EQTR, we can expect that she has the expertise to really carry forward this company through a marketing and sales plan for your expansion in the United States as it was planned for this expansion project. So here, overall, the timeline assumes a 1 year ramp up period that has been factored into the model, and a strong marketing expertise from Mireille in order to really get that ramp up, those sales going up in the future, as we've seen in the projected income statement. Now, financing options. Of course, financing is stressful. What do we do? What are the options? Can we afford it? What's going to happen if we can't afford it? So, first one, debt. These are just generalities. We're going to get more into details a bit later. It's generally cheaper than equity, of course. It implies more risk because you have covenants. You need to repay your debt, as you all know. And if you do not pay it, well, there might be recalls or repossessions of your belongings. Finally, tax deductible. Of course, it's more a cash-effective way to invest using debt. Then equity. Well, it's the opposite. Generally cheaper. What we see here is that investing through VCs, through funds like the FTQ, Capital Régional Desjardins, or CSN, these VCs, these investors, they usually tend to put a very strict covenants, and they have an exit strategy in 5 to 7 years. The problem we see with that is you need the funds in 5 or 7 years if you want to keep control of your company. So they might get in 5 years, sell their shares, and you lose control of your company again. You do not want that. And this is in addition to all the paperwork that's involved with working with venture capitalists and all the overlook that they want to have over the company. So for this is a really important point in this. Finally, loss of control. They will want board seats. They will want exposure to the business. They will want to know what's going on. So for this reason, we recommend that you may pursue with Capital Régional Desjardins, and we will come back again later for the really segmentation of what the financing options really is in the end. But we do not recommend you going forward with FTQ or CSN, as Mireille has proposed and has learned in her bachelor's that it is an option that she could go forward with. So the optimal financing solution. First, real estate loan. So we have a 1.4 real estate loan for the expansion of the plant. What we see here is you want a 20-year amortized loan, a mortgage basically, on the expansion of this plant at a rate of 4% that has been factored into the model. Then the loan for the MRP, for the manufacturing resource planning, here you want a 3-year cash flow loan. So there's no, it's a bullet payment. You repay back in 3 years at a rate of 10% per annum, and so but there's no principal repayments in the meantime, right? Finally, machinery loan. So this would be an 8-year double bullet repayment involving a 6.5%, so about prime plus 5 or so. So this is what we've estimated that could be realistic for a machinery loan, as they have an asset in mortgage. So the overall here is that you can potentially finance the machinery through an alternative funding entity. So for the real estate loan, you should go with Capital Desjardins, Régional Desjardins. But for the machinery loan, what we see here is that you are going to export to the US, right, from our understanding. And you can secure loans through the EDC or Investment Quebec at probably cheaper rates, as it is their duty as government entities to invest in Canadian and Quebec businesses in the near future. So you can probably secure better rates, better conditions, better governance in the end by going through these financing entities. Finally, risk and mitigations. So of course there's always risk and mitigations involved in every project. The first one, longer ramp up in sales. We have used quite conservative assumptions, and we believe that Mireille's expertise in marketing will truly enable the sales ramp up to actually happen in the near future. For time constraints here, we will come back to the risk and mitigations if you desire to go back during the Q&A period. But we really thank you for your attention, and we can answer any questions that you may have, both in English or French. There's no problem with that. Thank you for your attention.
Premièrement, bravo. Très belle présentation. Qu'est-ce qui vous a fait opter, je sais que tu parlais d'un mortgage comme une maison, mais pour 20 ans, l'amortissement, c'est quand même une longue période, si on veut, pour une entreprise.
Pour de l'industriel, je suis d'accord que ça peut sembler être une longue période, mais l'idée ici, c'est de vraiment, quand on regarde la structure du capital en entier pour le projet, donc on a un 1.4, on a un 1.2, puis on a 300 000, c'est dans l'intérêt de la banque vraiment d'amortir le terme le plus longtemps possible, puis peut-être aussi d'avoir je ne me rappelle pas du nom, mais que le cash flow retourne directement vers l'amortissement de la dette pour réduire l'amortissement au fur et à mesure que la période avance. Donc la raison est que c'est plus réaliste pour la compagnie de pouvoir repayer sur 20 ans le real estate loan de 1,4 million.
Ok, parfait. Merci.
Ok, parfait. Très belle présentation également. J'ai beaucoup aimé le fait que vous avez opté pour le projet 1 et donc vous avez proposé de financer par capitaux propres et par dette en même temps. Parfait. Et j'ai beaucoup aimé aussi le fait que vous ayez insisté sur les risques du capital, sur le financement du capital risque. C'est très bien. Mais est-ce qu'il y a d'autres sources de financement par capitaux propres auxquelles M. Gauthier aurait pu profiter?
Okay, oui, il existe évidemment d'autres par capitaux propres, d'autres que FTQ et CSN. Il y a plusieurs banques qui ont des divisions investissement en capitaux. Par contre, on recommande pas nécessairement d'aller trop avec les investissements par capitaux propres au final, parce que si on veut que l'entreprise passe aux mains de Mireille dans le futur, puis vraiment avoir un impact long terme sur la famille et sur les générations à suivre, c'est vraiment important de garder le contrôle sur la compagnie au final, puis d'aller avec de l'équité si c'est possible, ou si c'est pas possible, mais de réellement minimiser la quantité d'équité investie.
Ok, parfait. Merci.
Une petite question juste en terminant. Vous avez semblé suggérer le capital régional par rapport aux deux autres solutions, FTQ, CSN. Quel genre de montant vous pensez qu'il pourrait être allé? Quel genre de montant vous pouvez aller chercher, vous pensez, de cette alternative-là?
C'est une bonne question. Dans le fond, dans ce qu'on a assumé, on a été chercher le 1,4 million complet pour le real estate. C'est vrai que le montant pourrait ne pas être financé au complet, mais il y aurait d'autres moyens de financement pour vraiment arriver avec le cash down au final pour sécuriser le prêt ou l'investissement.
Parfait. Merci.
Une super belle présentation.
Merci.
Bravo.
Merci.